Here at the Drift, we call him the Shark Doc. Here he is again, Greg Skomal. Greg, how are you?
Hey, John, it's good to be back. I'm doing great.
All right, so Discovery and HBO and all the big networks, and of course, the Drift. We like to think that, you're a friend.
Yeah, well, you're right up there with those others, that's for sure.
So, shark activity this year, it seems like every year, it's the worst season for shark activity. Is that the case? You're tagging away, clearly.
We are tagging, John, but I'm going to be really honest and tell you that, the shark activity you're hearing is largely media driven. We've been out 4 times, 5 times. We've only tagged 5 sharks, and as recent as 2 days ago, I couldn't find a single white shark, off the coast of Cape Cod. So shark activity is not as active as the media wants you to believe.
August comes around, people start watching Jaws or having these in-water viewings of Jaws, and everybody out of the water. Not the case. So you feel that the shark activity in this area, in the Cape Cod, New England area, is about normal?
Yeah, it's I would even say a little below normal. Usually by early August, I'm seeing a lot more activity, and we're not. So that remains to be seen what happens. We're going to obviously spend the next 3 months on the water. We'll see if it ramps up or if it stays relatively low. But again, I'm just referencing white sharks off of Cape Cod. I can't say much about other species that have been traveling up to Long Island, for example, in other areas.
Tell me about some of the sharks that you've tagged. We've come to know them. We know them by name. Who's in the area?
Well, one of the first sharks to show up this year is a shark we tagged back in 2016 named Luke. And Luke is probably the shark we've detected most since we've tagged him. He's come back every year since 2016. I have not seen him yet this year, but he is around. We keep getting acoustic detections of him. Other sharks that we've seen this year, or at least heard from this year, include Scarface, which is another shark we've known for many, many years. So it's almost like they're old friends, because they're coming back year after year after year.
Why Scarface? How did he get that name?
Scarface, for obvious reasons, for some strange reason, had a scar on his head, and it was very visible. Probably administered either by a seal or another shark, and was a logical name for him.
How large are these sharks? What size sharks are we talking about here?
We primarily work with sharks in the average range of 9 to 12 feet, but we have which are not adults unless they're males. Males are adults at about 12 feet long. We have seen sharks though, including this year. We saw one that was about 6 feet long, and I've tagged them all the way up to about 18 feet long. So we get the full size range, but the average is about 9 to 12 feet.
12 is okay for me. 9 foot, 12, 9, 12, you're up there. How big is the mouth on that shark?
Oh, I guess like this,
Yeah, that'll do it.
They're really large. They're well equipped to attack and kill seals, which is their primary prey when they're hunting off Cape Cod.
Yeah, and we know the seal population is certainly up right now.
Even though, again, this is kind of an off year. Now, it remains to be seen whether this changes in August, but, we have not seen the big numbers of seal haul outs we've seen in previous years. It wouldn't be uncommon for us to see 500-600 seals on the beach, along Monomoy or along the Outer Cape. And we're not seeing those as well. So I'm wondering if the seals are starting to figure out that there's big fish out there that want to eat them, and maybe moving to other parts. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, when you see 300 or 400 seals out there, it's sort of a seal buffet for the sharks and the bigger fish, right?
Yeah. But it's not easy for the sharks to kill the seals. I mean, they have to hunt close to shore. The Cape Cod's a very challenging environment for them. There's a heavy surf in some areas. There's shifting sandbars, really shallow water, poor visibility. And so, those kinds of conditions make it incredibly challenging for white sharks to successfully feed on seals.
Greg, I like to say that you have the coolest state job on the planet, right? You're a marine biologist. You work for the state of Massachusetts. It doesn't get much better than that if you're into fish like you are, right?
Yeah, I mean, arguably, I'll take on anybody else that works in state service in terms of the adventure in my job, the fun, what I get to do. I mean, a lot of people see what I do on TV. What they don't see is the data analysis, the compilation of data, the writing, the grant writing, all the things behind the scenes. But it's still, bar none, I think the best job, in civil service.
What brought you to your love of sharks? Was it a Jaws thing? Because you were just that right age, right?
Yeah, I am at the right age. I saw it in a movie theater, in Fairfield, Connecticut, where I grew up, and that was back in 1975. I already liked sharks. I liked fish. I thought sharks were really cool animals. Jaws definitely impacted me, but not like it did other people. Most people were frightened by the big plastic shark. I thought it was really fascinating, and I was fascinated by the guy who was the marine biologist in the film, played by Richard Dreyfuss. So,
Great.
at an early age, I decided maybe that would be a really cool job to get.
Well, it is a cool job to get. And not only that, do you do your work with the state and your wonderful work on media and informing the public, um, you're very much involved with the White Shark Conservancy, right? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Oh, absolutely. The Atlantic White Shark Conservancy is a nonprofit started in 2012 to not only assist with funding our research, um, but it also has the mission of educating the public about white sharks and trying to enhance public safety regarding white
Mm.
sharks. So my agency, the Division of Marine Fisheries, has a really close working relationship with the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy. It's a really excellent public-private partnership where
Sure.
their scientists work very closely with us. The education department works along with us, and we try to get not only the information, the research done, but the information out to the general public as quickly as we can. And to do that, of course they've established the Sharktivity app, which we post data to in almost real time.
So there's an app that we can get on our phone, obviously, it'll pinpoint where sharks are. I mean, to any tagged shark, I would assume, right?
Right, right. So what it is it's a sightings app, and I want people to use the app more for educational purposes
Hmm.
than to really bank on it for public safety. Just because there hasn't been a report, a sighting, a detection of a tagged white shark at any particular beach along the outer Cape doesn't mean there isn't one there at that moment. But if people look at the Sharktivity app, they can get a sense of where the sharks are most prevalent, and what they're going to find out is most beaches in Massachusetts, are basically free of white sharks. And so,
Hmm.
this idea that white sharks are everywhere is dispelled by the data that we've collected. Really, they
Well,
spend the bulk of their time along the outer Cape. Any given day, any given hour, there could be a white shark, hunting in shallow water. One of our studies we completed a couple of years ago clearly demonstrated that white sharks spend almost 50% of their time in water less than 15 feet deep.
hmm,
All right. So that's a lot of overlap with human activities along the outer Cape. And we think the
sure
public
is.
really needs to be aware of that.
Right. So the app will show you with a tag, and it'll give you a sense for shark activity in general. It's Sharktivity is the app, correct?
Exactly. Yeah. It'll give you the most recent reports. And if somebody sees a white shark, they can report it through the app as well. But for those folks who are prone to joking around, we do vet every single report. It doesn't automatically go up, and we will follow up with you. So if you want to report a white shark, swimming in Boston Harbor, we're going to pretty much find out that that's not true.
How are you and your team dispatched? If it is, I know you have spotter planes that are up, but if somebody sees shark or shark activity, is it like, pull the hook to the bat cave, get in the shark mobile and head out there to find it and tag it?
We will absolutely do that if there's a dead whale with white sharks feeding on it, because those kinds of events draw lots of sharks and give us ample opportunities to tag. So we will pull the ripcord and rush out there, mobilize the boats, get in the vehicles, do whatever we have to do to get out to that whale as quickly as possible. In other situations, unless there's a dead shark on the beach, and we have responded to dead sharks, and we do the same kind of thing. We mobilize and get to those locations as quickly as possible. But again, in most situations, we plan our research, our field work based on weather conditions. So we try to get out any good weather day. And good weather really for us is light wind, high sun, low cloud cover, good visibility on the water so our spotter plane can see. And we'll try to do that largely Monday through Friday, because we find if we try to work on weekends, there's far too many other boats on the water, and it's hard for us to get our work done.
So I have to ask about the increase in dead whales washing ashore. And there's a controversy. There's talk about boat strikes, and there's also talk about sonar testing for offshore wind. Do you see an increase in dead whales, or is this normal and it's just getting, as you said about the sharks, hyped up in the media?
Well, the media hypes a lot, and there's a lot of media outlets, it better than I do, John.
Sure.
And so, they're going to hype up anything they possibly can. I don't know enough about whale physiology and the situations involved, specific situation for each of these deaths. But I do have colleagues who study whales very intensively. And when you see a number of mortality events, it's generally designated as what they call unusual mortality event. And they dive down really deep into pathology, into the necropsy data, and all the conditions and factors that can be attributed to the death of that animal. Now, I haven't seen anything issued just yet, but I am being patient, and I'm waiting for my colleagues who do this kind of work to come back to us. We have seen a number of dead whales here in Massachusetts already. Unfortunately, they weren't floating long enough to attract white sharks. And I certainly don't wish for dead whales to attract white sharks, but if the poor creatures do pass, they do provide an incredible amount of calories for the species that I study, and it's natural for them to scavenge them.
So what should folks do if they're swimming and they see a shark? The obvious thing, try to get out of the water, but is a fast movement warranted? Or if they see one in a distance, what should the process be? What should we humans, it's their space. I'm not a big diver. I've never been a diver, right? And I've always said, down there is reserved for them, for the fish. I'll stay up here, thank you. So, but what should you do if you're in the water and you see a white shark?
Well, if you're in the water and you see any shark and you're uncertain of its species, you definitely want to get out of the water. Mm-hmm. Even if the animal is not particularly close to you, and the key here is not to panic. Don't splash. Don't behave like an injured fish or a seal, Mm-hmm. And so back out of the water very, very, calmly. Keep your eyes on the shark as best you can. All right. Now, if you're swimming near a boat, it's kind of hard to keep your eyes on the shark while you're getting back to the boat. But again, don't panic, and try to back up very, very slowly and get out of the water. If the shark does approach you and appears to be threatening and enters your personal space, and that I mean within a few feet of you, and it appears to be continuing in your direction, and you can't get out of its way, I would tell you to punch or kick the animal. Don't go out of your way. Don't reach out to get it because it's swimming past you. But if it's entering your personal space dead on, right towards you, you want to strike that animal. Now, the probability of that happening is very, very low. And again, yes, go ahead, kick it, strike it in any way. That generally will deter the animal. But these are rare, rare events. But be mindful that if you're swimming in an area where white sharks are hunting seals, the possibility exists, although the probability remains low.
Stay away from the red bathing suits. You know, that's probably not a good idea. Black and red. We'll stay away from that during shark season, right?
Well, certainly wetsuits, you know, although it's hard to demonstrate these, there's so few shark attacks, John, on Earth that it's really hard for scientists to study them and come up with trends. Like, say, an insurance company can calculate the risk of you getting in in a car accident based on where you live, right? But shark scientists have great difficulty trying to get a sense of the risk of shark attack and what to do and what not to do, what to wear, what not to wear, because there's so few of them.
Boy,
But
when they
certainly you don't want to
happen,
dress like a seal.
when they happen, you sure do know about them, right? Again, back to the media, the old media adage: if it bleeds, it leads, right? That's the top story of the newscast. But there are few shark attacks. How many shark attacks on the East Coast, let's say, in the last 5 years?
Well, I'll tell you, on a global scale, the average is somewhere between 70 and 80 shark attacks in the world. And less than 10% of those, or roughly 10%, are fatal. So that's on a global scale. Now, the US, because we have so many people in the water and we have certain areas, namely the eastern shoreline of Florida, there's one specific area where surfers and swimmers tend to be bitten more frequently than anywhere else. And that's because there's smaller sharks that are feeding in those nearshore areas and again, overlapping with human activities. These are not severe bites, but they happen with great frequency, meaning there's, not dozens, but certainly, a handful every year, which is a lot. And any event like this, any kind of shark bite, draws a lot of media attention, but also are very traumatic. Sharks can do a lot of damage, particularly a white shark. And so, just a few years ago in 2018, now I guess 5 years ago, we had a fatal shark attack off of Cape Cod. And that can have devastating effects, as you can imagine, not only on people and their psyche, and of course the impact on the family of the victim, but also on local economy and such. Although, admittedly, we have not seen that.
What would be considered a new technology in shark research?
The new electronic tags that are now available, John. So many of them, what's happened over the course of my career, and again, a lot of this is in the book. You see this amazing, expansion in new technologies, the development of new technologies. So I went from, not having, the closest computer to me at the University of Rhode Island was a big mainframe that, many of us didn't even know how to use. You had to write in different kinds of program languages. And now, everybody has one of these things, right? Everybody has one of these. And these technologies are now being, used to study shark behavior. And we've got camera systems, new sensors, satellite linkages, better batteries, all of which are being packaged into tags that we put on sharks to study live ones and not rely on studying dead ones. And it's been a really cool time to live and be a scientist.
Yeah, you've spent some time chasing shadows, and that'll segue into chatting about your incredible new book. It's a fascinating read. It's Chasing Shadows. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's a book I didn't think I would write until after I retired, but with the urging of a literary agent named Susan Canavan, and with the assistance of a phenomenal writer named Rhett Talbot, I did this much sooner than I thought I would. And it really is about the trajectory of my career, my life, growing up as a kid who wanted to study white sharks, to being able to actually do that, while talking about the history of white shark research, what happens when you restore white sharks to an area and they overlap with humans, talking about shark attacks, the complexity of managing species like seals and sharks, all through the eyes of my life. And it includes a number of stories about research on other shark species. And it doesn't read, it doesn't read like a textbook. It reads, I think, more like an adventure, and which my life has been.
I would agree. It certainly does. It certainly does chronicle the adventure of your life and your work, which is great. And don't say retirement. What does a guy like you do when he retires? Will you quit chasing sharks? No, you'll never retire.
I think I'm always going to be chasing shadows, even if they're just in my brain.
Right.
I don't think I'll retire, but we'll see what happens the next 5 years. I'm always going to be dabbling with shark research. There's so much, we have so much data that we need to write them up. We need to publish them. Certainly we share them with the public as much as we can, but my life's, my work's not going to end anytime soon. But I may transition a bit to other projects.
What was that one moment when you were writing and co-writing Chasing Shadows that you said, wow, this is, even though I've lived this and this is sort of a chronicle of my life and career, you said, wow, that's interesting. That's really going to reach out and grab.
Well, I think it was, the book's in 3 major parts. It's my early career and the history of sharks, shark fishing, what we knew about white sharks way back in the 70s and 80s. Then I transitioned to Martha's Vineyard, where I lived for 23 years and developed a shark research program for the state of Massachusetts, kind of using my federal mentors, Jack Casey, Wes Pratt, as a template for my own research and learning from them. And then the third part of that book goes into what we do with white sharks now and the complexity of the issues surrounding white sharks overlapping with swimmers off Cape Cod and the new technologies. But in writing the book, I had to dive way back into old stories and look at the real milestones in my life, which in early on didn't involve white sharks. Although some of them did, my first white shark dissection, my first dive with sharks, in a cage, outside of a cage, my work on Greenland sharks under 6 feet of Arctic ice, and then, diving with basking sharks and putting tags in them, work with bluefin tuna. There's all these things. And, cumulatively, I looked at this and said, wow, I've had a hell of a lot of fun my whole life. It wasn't one single moment that did it. It was like, me just kind of breezing on from adventure to adventure and realizing, now looking back, how great it was for me.
Yeah. And I will say your career, it's certainly an interesting job, fascinating job. I mean, I wouldn't consider being in a cage next to a shark as fun, but that's just me.
Come on, John.
That moment. Tell me about that. Maybe I'll go down with you one of these days, or send my camera crew down with you.
That'd be fun.
So tell me about that moment when you're face to face with that shark, and you call it a predator, right? Some people might say, well, it's kind of a negative. What do you mean it's a predator? It's an animal. It's a predator. It's out there. It wants to eat you. Your lunch. Right? And you had that moment, that viral moment from a couple of years ago where when one came up and made a run at you, I think as you said it. Do you ever get to a point where you go, wow, we're a little too close for comfort?
I think what comes out in the book, and the more I wrote about it and worked with Rhett, the more I realized just how much my own personal fear exists of these animals. I've seen what they do. Obviously, I had one jump up at me, but I've never really been threatened by a white shark. I've come close with other species, but never been threatened by a white shark. But I have seen what white sharks do not only to their natural prey, seals. These are top predators. This is the world's largest, macro predator that eats big things. And to call it anything else, it would be incorrect from a scientific point of view. But they're not predators on people. People are not their natural prey. but they make mistakes, and it happens rarely, but it happens. And I've seen what that looks like. I've seen somebody who at one moment was alive and happy and healthy, and the next moment not. And that you'll see in the book takes a toll on me, professionally to some extent, but personally as well, to the extent where, I will wake up in the middle of the night, after having a nightmare about being in the water with a white shark. I have great respect. I revere them. I love them in many ways, but I've also seen what they can do and how they can devastate a life or a family in a split second. And so what you'll see in the book is how that has, in some ways, weighed heavily on me from a psychological point of view.
So give me sort of a positive point from your writings in your book, something that made you say, "God, I love that. That's a great story." There are a lot in there, but
Yeah.
give me that. Let's leave on that note.
Yeah, I don't mean to drag you down. I mean, I don't dwell in the negative, but
I'll have the nightmares now. Thanks. But, yeah, let's go with the positive.
Well, I think, what we've been able to do, the first study done on white sharks in terms of their natural behavior in the Atlantic was way back in 1979. A researcher from Woods Hole, the real Matt Hooper, I like to call him, Frank Carey, he tracked a white shark for 3 days. And that was it. That's all we knew since 1979. And over the course of the last decade, we've exploded the knowledge about white shark behavior over multiple scales. Not only what they do from year to year in terms of their migratory patterns, but also what they do from week to week, day to day, hour to hour. And now we're diving into what they're doing from second to second. And to see that, and to reflect on it, it makes me really proud and very positive, because what's happening is, we're seeing the restoration, the successful restoration of a natural ecosystem. Yeah, it has repercussions, but the risk of those repercussions is really low. And we're seeing, actually conservation succeed. And that's as good as it gets as far as I'm concerned. To be part of that is as good as it gets.
Dr. Greg Skomal, thanks for being with us. Thanks to you and your team. Continue to chase shadows, because you're doing amazing work. And to get the book, what do we do?
Well, it's sold anywhere books are sold, from local bookstores to online bookstores. So, yeah, it is available.
We call him the Shark Doc. Thanks for being our friend. Thanks for joining us, Greg.
My pleasure, John. Always great to hang out with you.
The Drift Podcast can be found at driftsociably.com or where all fine podcasts are heard.